Hi there, it's Nicole here today with a set of textured background cards with watercolored floral accents featuring pretty pink Posh stamps and dies and some sequins. These are all new products from the November release. The stamp set is the Wild Rose stamp set with coordinating dies, and then that awesome thank you is the thank you script die. So really pretty. I created some textured backgrounds and I created a whole set of cards that I'm going to show you assembly line style. There are quite a few steps involved in this. A little bit of dry time because of the embossing paste and the watercolor, but I really just kind of did things one thing at a time, enjoyed the process, and I was left with a beautiful set of thank you cards. I am going to start with an older Pretty Pink Posh product. This is a stitched border from the Stitched Borders 2 die collection. And I've got a bunch of pre-cut A2 sized backgrounds here, and I'm using the grid on my work surface to tape that straight stitched border in place about an inch up from the bottom. A grid work surface is fantastic for anytime you need to measure things like this. It makes it really easy. So I'm simply going to do this for 6 sheets of paper. This is so that the top panel here is going to be colorful and have some Distress Oxide ink all over it, plus some other distressing. And then the bottom part of the panel will just be plain white for a little bit of interest. I love stitched borders, especially for whatever reason, straight stitched borders and a scallop stitch border. I think they add just a really nice decorative touch. Sure, you could definitely just trim this down if you don't have a die, but I really like the addition of that stitching detail. I think it gives each edge a really beautiful, nice finished edge. I am not going to share inking every single one of these panels. However, I am going to share this first one here with the Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide ink. I am using all Distress Oxide inks and doing a rainbow color in a more brighter palette rather than the primary color palette. This is Peacock Feathers, so I'm working out of order, but I'm starting at that bottom stitched edge, adding the ink with a lot heavier hand, and then working my way up, lightening as I go for an ombre effect. This is regular white cardstock, Nina heavyweight cardstock, no specialty cardstock here at all. And I'm just going to simply ink this until I feel like the coverage is a nice seamless transition from light to dark. Then I will spritz it with water from a distress sprayer to give it some distressing, set it aside to air dry, and it air dries pretty quickly. You could heat it up with a heat tool if you wanted to, but I am going to let all of mine air dry, and then I can come back and add some embossing paste on top. I did use picked raspberry, spiced marmalade, fossilized amber, twisted citron, peacock feathers, and wilted violet as my background colors. This is one of my backgrounds. This is that peacock feathers background, and I am very messily applying white embossing paste through the Simon Says Stamp grid stencil. And I don't want it to be completely covering the whole background. I want it to be kind of messy and just be more texture. Now, it's really white when it first goes on. One great thing about a really thin application like I'm doing here, especially over these Distress Oxide inks, as it dries, it's really going to take on the color of the inking behind it. So instead of being this bright white on the color, it's going to be more of a texture. You could also apply some ink to the white embossing paste and then apply it over the top if you want it to be even more the color of your background rather than the white on top that picks up the color. I'm going to do this on every single background. I did not worry a whole lot about being super neat and tidy. It's more about getting that embossing paste just kind of in several places all over the background Again, a very thin application. I'm using the edge of my palette knife to really wipe that smooth. I do not want it to be terribly dimensional. I want it to have that nice texture and dimension, but still be fairly flat and easy to mail. Every single background is getting this embossing paste treatment. I have also trimmed down some thin strips to use for the bottom half of the card. I could just leave it plain white, but I really felt like I wanted that little bottom edge to have some sort of texture as well, but I don't want it to take away from the rest of the card. The top 2/3 of the design of each of these cards is really where all the action is going to be taking place. That bottom is just going to be an awesome texture, and my favorite texture is white on white. I think it's classic, it's beautiful, and it's just a fantastic little accent here along the bottom. Just like the top pieces, I am applying my embossing paste really messily. It's not going to be the same on every card, just kind of similar, and I'm applying that embossing paste kind of messily, again, a nice thin coating, and setting all of these aside to dry. The great thing about this embossing paste is it does dry really quickly. I probably let it set longer than I would have needed to, simply because I waited to do all my stamping and watercoloring until after I had all of this part done. That way I knew for sure that I could let it all sit and completely air dry, so that when I got to the point where I wanted to put my cards together, this part was all dry and ready to be attached to a card base. I am now taking those beautiful rose and leaf images, the wild rose images from the Wild Rose Pretty Pink Posh new stamp set. This is new for November. It's part of the November release. It's a beautiful floral stamp set. Florals and leaves, no greetings, which means you can use anything you want with this gorgeous stamp set. I needed a bunch of thank you cards, and so this is what I'm making. I think these would make a fantastic gift. I've paired them all with really pretty Simon Says stamp envelopes. You could tie them up, put them in a little clear box, and the presentation would be really beautiful. I am stamping all of these florals and leaves on some Bristol Smooth cardstock with Versamark ink and heat embossing with white embossing powder. That's so that I can do some watercoloring with Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I have shown this particular technique several times before. It's one of my very favorites. I call it kind of a cheater watercolor, which is my favorite kind of watercoloring to do. And that's because the embossed area kind of holds in the ink and the water, and it doesn't go outside the line that way. And I really, really love it. I am going to add a couple colors of the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers kind of around the edge of the design, then take a water brush pen and blend out that color. And the embossed line is going to help hold that water inside of the image. I really like the look of letting my images air dry, but you could definitely hit them with a heat tool if you needed to. I had a whole bunch of these scraps of paper of Bristol Smooth cardstock, so I would fill as many images as I could on one sheet. I am not going to share coloring every single image. There are 3 flowers and then 3 leaf images on each card, which means that's quite a lot of stamping and coloring. It's a lot of repetition though. So I am going to share the coloring of one of the flowers and then a few leaves, and then the rest are all just the same thing, just repeated with a different flower image. This is the purple color combination. I have listed the colors I'm using along the top of the screen here. I'm using violet and light violet, and then blending it out with my water brush pen. You can see there's quite a bit of water there. As it air dries, it really gives you that watercolored effect. My pink color combination is pink and sugared almond pink, which sugared almond pink is my favorite of the pink colors in the Zig family. Cleaning off the tip of my marker frequently because it's picking up a lot of that dark color and I want to get that off of there. And again, blending all of that out. You can see the beautiful wild rose take shape as the ink is blended out. My aqua color combination, or teal I guess, is turquoise green and green shadow. This is one of my favorite color combinations just because this is probably my favorite color. I love, love, love this aqua or teal color combination and it's so pretty. Again, just blending all of that out, making sure and getting every little area colored in. I'm double checking my color combinations to see if they're going to look good on the backgrounds there. For blue, I am using the blue and cobalt blue. Again, this is a favorite color combination. You're really getting a lot of my favorite Zig color combinations with this particular project. I do get asked a lot, and I think I'll just talk about it real quick, what set I get when I bought when I got the Zigs. I did not buy them in a set. I bought my markers individually, and I didn't buy very many to start out with. You really don't need a ton. I kind of bought what I thought I would like, and I filled in over time with a few additional markers, but I don't think, just recently I kind of got a few more and maybe filled in most of the collection. I still don't have them all, but you really don't have to have all of them to begin with. I don't really like buying in sets simply because I end up getting some colors I know I'll never use. If you're interested in some of my favorites, this is a great video for that. This is a lot of my favorite color combinations for colorful type of coloring. So here are all my color combinations for purple, pink, aqua, blue, orange, and yellow. And then green, this is my favorite green color combination. It is light green and yellow green. And I'll have that listed here in just a second. It should pop up. But I really love that too. Lots of bright coloring. Again, I'm going to set that aside to completely air dry. Here is a few more of the images that I'm going to share quickly, coloring those in. Laying down my dark color first, blending with that lighter color, and I color pretty sloppily here. You don't have to be super specific since you're going to be watercoloring it anyway. I'm just pulling out that dark a little bit for that nice gradation of color. You could also color them completely in with the markers and forego the water altogether, and it's going to give a little bit more of a vibrant look, but just as beautiful. I love both effects or techniques very much. You want to make sure and clean the tip of your water brush pen frequently. I picked up a little bit of green into my purple flower there because I forgot to clean it. I think I was able to blend it out most of the way, and that doesn't bother me too much, but sometimes that can really ruin an image, so I like to have a paper towel handy to clean off that tip of my water brush marker when I switch colors. Just showing again, coloring in all of these little individual flowers. This is the smallest flower image. All the same color combinations that I talked about before are used for all of these. Once I have all of my flowers colored and they have completely air dried, I'm going to go ahead and die cut these with the coordinating dies. And that does take a little bit of time simply because you have to line up the dies and run them through. I do hold them down with a little bit of Post-it tape, but then you have all of your flowers ready to be attached to your card. I also have some black cardstock here that I am stamping the greeting, "You're the best," from the Pretty Pink Posh Birdie Friends stamp set. This is going to be a nice little additional greeting for the card in addition to the thank you script. And I have stamped these greetings on black cardstock with Versamark ink and heat embossed with white embossing powder. And I need to stamp a few of these. That Tombow Mono eraser is fantastic for removing little embossing powder flecks or other little things from your projects. I don't know what I ever did without that eraser. I really love it. just heat setting all these little greetings. I'm trimming them into really thin strips using a paper trimmer to trim these down. I'm using the Tonic Guillotine trimmer, and then just using my scissors to snip them into these little teeny tiny strips that are going to be the perfect accent to go with the thank you script greeting. The thank you script was die cut from just regular Nina Smooth White cardstock. I did die cut that 6 times. I contemplated doing several different things, and I even tried a couple things, adding ink to them, die cutting from gold foil cardstock, all kinds of things, and none of it just looked right to me. So I stuck with the smooth white cardstock, and I'm so glad I did. I think that really looks nice with this particular card design. I'm attaching that bottom white textured panel to a side fold card base along the bottom edge, then attaching the inked and texturized border on the top portion. If it overhangs a little bit, I'm just going to trim that up with my scissors as I go along. Make sure it looks nice and neat. Then I'm going to start attaching all of my flowers. The flowers go first, then the scripty greeting, then the little greeting phrase, and finally we'll finish with some sequins. So this is the assembly portion of the card project. We have all of the elements needed to put the card together. Going to pop out all the little inside pieces from the script style greeting, because I want to make sure that I'm positioning this right where I want it to go. I am going to make sure that some of the flowers or some of the leaves overhang on each side. This really helps ground a card so that it doesn't appear that the images are just kind of all floating out in outer space. Having some of them kind of hang off the side, we'll just trim off that excess here in a little bit, really just gives it a much nicer grounded look. I'm also tucking the flowers and leaves here, some of the flowers behind other leaves, and just to give a nice little collage. The bigger grouping is over on the right side, and the smaller grouping will be down in the bottom left. Everything on the colorful texture panel though. And this is a really good example of the yellow colors picking up that yellow, the embossing paste picking up that yellow background. You can really see the difference between that and the embossing paste on the white border along the bottom edge of the card. I'm going to use some Ranger Multi-Matte Medium, just adding some little dabs or dots of glue to the back of my greeting. And then I'm going to pop the word "you" down first. I did do one card completely before I did the rest of them, so I do have a little bit of a guide to go from. When I first did and designed the card, or where everything is going to go, I laid out my dies along that border and tucked the flowers underneath until I figured it out, and that gave me a really good guideline to know where everything was going to go. I want the thank you to be nice and centered, and then I'm going to tuck one of the little phrase strips here underneath part of the letter K and then over the rest of the letters. Again, it just grounds it really nicely. To help hold everything down while that glue dries, I like to pop a couple of acrylic blocks in place to hold that down. I'm going to continue to do that for all of the rest of the cards, then trim off that excess overhang on each card design. There's just a little bit on each side, a couple of flowers, or a flower rather, and a couple of tips of leaves. And then I'm going to take a 1/2 inch corner rounder and round the corners on all 4 corners on each card. Just kind of helps soften the look a little bit. I used to do this all the time, and I don't do it that much anymore. Every time I round the corners, I think, I wish I did this more often. I really love the nice soft edges this gives a card design. I think it works really nice in this case with the florals and the more feminine feeling of this particular design. Once I have all the corners rounded, I'm going to add little dots of glue. I'm using the Ranger Multi-Matte Medium. And then I'm going to use some of the droplets and sequins from the Pretty Pink Posh Berry Bright Mix. This is a brand new mix for November. I'm using the clear droplets and then green sequins for each of my card designs. So a little scattering of green there and then the little clear droplets. I think they look like dewdrops on the flowers. So, so pretty. Same design for each card, keeping it pretty similar anyway. The Quick Stick tool makes placing these sequins throughout the card design so much easier. And I like the Ranger Multi-Matte Medium. It dries matte, so even if a little glue comes out from underneath the embellishment, I think it's not near as noticeable because it's not glossy. Once I have all of my sequins and droplets in place, my cards are all finished. Here's another look at all 6 cards. All together, here's my purple and my pink, yellow, blue, green, and orange. Thanks for joining me today for these textured background cards featuring watercolored floral accents. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Pretty Pink Posh that you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.